All right. Well, I'm here today and I was kind of inspired by a video from Steve over at Steve's Small Engine Saloon. And he was addressing the question about soaking your nylon trimmer line in water. You know, does it help? I guess the premise is soaking it in water will make it last longer, or it'll rehydrate it or something. Well, on a related note, there's also been a question about nylon trimmer line, but the question is kind of different. This is, you know, can you use the nylon trimmer line as a filament on your 3D printers, right? Well, I think I can give some information that will kind of tackle these questions from two different sides. On one side, from the lawn and garden industry, and from the 3D printing industry. So, these are two very different questions and applications, but they are definitely related. For the trimmer user, soaking it in water has been a question that's been tossed around for a long time, and from what I can see, it's just a matter of opinion. I've seen no conclusion so far. It's either you do or you don't. And Steve over at Steve's Small Engine Saloon, he had a real quick video, and I believe in his opinion he didn't see any change over a span of 3 years of looking at his lines. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I got out of it. So there are guys on both sides of the coin. Some say it works, others don't. So for the 3D printer or maker, using nylon trimmer line has been shown many times. And a couple of years ago, printing with the line in some of the post-printing tests, it was shown by Stefan over at CNC Kitchen. So he demonstrated that the nylon trimmer line can be printed with, as long as certain conditions and settings are used, just like you would do with any other traditional nylon filament. So first of all, there are many different types of filaments that you can use to 3D print with. Some of the more common ones are PLA, PETG, ABS, ASA, PA6, PA12, which are both nylons, and now you can have them with percentage of carbon fiber in them. And of course now there's metal 3D printing. But this was just a few of them. I mean, each one are different compounds, they have different characteristics, different specifications, and they are very different both when you're printing it and in your final product. So a big point on this is that all these filaments are hygroscopic, meaning that they are going to attract H2O from the air at different levels. So take note of the difference between this PA6 and PA12 from Polymaker. Now these are both nylons. The longer PA12 polymer chain is much more resistant to moisture absorption and will reach moisture equilibrium at a lower percentage than the PA6 filaments. So the less moisture intake means that there's going to be less mechanical changes between a dry and a wet filament. So a dryer is used to dry out these filaments, and with this dryer you can go up to 50 degrees C and up to I think up to 12 hours. And this one is just turned on, and you can see as the temperature slowly climbs up, this is reading a level of 20% humidity. And usually if they're wet, they're in like 30, 35 range or worse. And as it goes, it'll drop under 20. And that's what you're looking for. So on a side note, if the filament is moist when you're printing and you're trying to put it through one of these 3D printers, you'll hear a bubbling or a popping coming out of the hot ends here underneath, if you can see that, when you're printing it off. And these will get from 210 to 270 degrees C. So they're pretty hot, and all the water is evaporating and being shoved out of here. So that's what all the popping and the stuff is, and you'll see you'll be left with some fragments and some scars and stuff on your print. And this is an example. This, you know, it started to pop out, and you get some strands that start sticking out. So, nylon trimmer line is usually kept outside or in your garage on a shelf somewhere. So, is it drying out, or is it just sitting there reaching an equilibrium percentage level, you know, of moisture? So first, I want to start testing some of this line. So I want to see what level of moisture is in a new batch or off the shelf trimmer line as compared to an old trimmer line that I have. It's probably about a year old. And I'll do this by weighing each batch, putting them in this dryer, and then weigh it after taking out of the dryer, and that change in weight, you can get a percentage of moisture, right? And I'm going to do that with both the old lines and the new line and see if it's consistent. And what I'm going to do, I want to bend the trimmer line, say if it's a 180 degree bend, and do it with the old stuff, with the new stuff, you know, see if it bends, see if it's brittle, see if it breaks. I want to do that before I put it through the dryer, after I put it through the dryer, and then after I soak it in water, right? And out of curiosity, I will probably test a different brand. That way we can see if there's any hygroscopic, you know, moisture level differences, or just to see if it behaves different, right? Because we really don't know the specifications on the nylon. And when you think about it, a lot of these filaments that we use here, we know the properties of it, right? And that's why we can build a product out of it, because we know what we're dealing with. With the trimmer line, well, we're buying it as trimmer line, so I don't know if there's been any additives to the nylon or anything different. But since that they are nylons, those specifications will be kind of, they probably won't differ that much, but they'll probably differ. So here's some of the trimmer line that I have, and I thought I had some that was a little smaller. It looks like the smallest I have is the 0.80 inches or 2 millimeters, and this one is really old. It's years, and this one's probably almost a year. Last spring I got them. This one's very old. You can see the even the packaging is just falling apart. But the only difference is the diameter. Okay, when we're using for 3D printing, all this stuff, you can see they come in 1 kilogram spools and at 1.75 millimeters. And you can see that's pretty common. These were PETGs, which is okay. Now here's a PACF. So this is a nylon with carbon fiber, and it has been a pretty decent, very strong filament. But I still should be able to test with this. I'll put it through. I'm going to weigh them. I'll tear out the packaging so that we can just see exactly how much the filament weighs before and after the dryer here, like that. And then at least we can see the percentage of moisture. And we can still do all the bend testing and everything like this. So here is some of the new stuff I picked up. And, you know, I was trying to find some stuff that, you know, didn't have any funky shapes to it, no blades, and, you know, but I got this stuff because it's just nylon and it's cheap, right? Shakespeare trimmer line. This stuff was on clearance, so I got it. It's only a couple of bucks, right? But at least this stuff I can still, I'll measure it as it sits now. I'll take it out of the packaging first, so we'll know exactly what the what it weighs. We'll put it through the dryer, and we can see what percentage we're looking at of moisture, right? So we'll compare them all and see if they're in the same range or what. Then we'll dry them all and, you know, just go about the testing like that, because it's going to be in the dryer for 50 degrees. I think I'll do it for 12 hours. Then we'll continue testing. Well, before I actually cut some of these off, I just weighed them, but you can see I can just fold them over 180 degrees. They're not breaking. It's not like they're brittle. Let's see, where's the end point on this one? There she blows. Let's see what this one does. Same thing. You see there's still some elasticity in it. They're not breaking. This one, you can tell where I tried to bend it, but it didn't break. And there's still some elasticity left in it. This was the yellow stuff. This is probably about a year old. Here's some new stuff. Same thing. They're not breaking. This is the stuff that is years old. Who knows? 4 or 5 years old. And yeah, it's still not brittle. You see. Okay, now we can stack all these in here. We'll set it to 50 degrees for 12 hours. We'll weigh it again and see what percentage of moisture is in each. Alright, it is set. Alright, well, the tests are complete. Okay, so let's take a look at this spreadsheet here. As you can see, I used samples from old trimmer lines and a couple of new ones. The old ones ranged from 1 year to 5 years old, and the new ones were just off the shelf, right? They ranged in diameter from 0.065 to 0.095 inches. And to take note, filament that is used in 3D printing, they're usually about 1.75 millimeter. They have a larger size, but in this case it's 1.75 millimeters or 0.068 inches. So you can see the testing that was done here. I took the weight of all of the trimmer lines pre-dryer, and then weighed them after the dryer and calculated the moisture percentage. And down at the bottom you can see where I bent them 180 degree bends before dryer and after drying, and I did not see any difference. I bent them all the same. They weren't brittle. I couldn't feel any difference. Now back to the moisture percentage, you can see they're all pretty low, right? That's pretty low percentage. And of course the lower the better, meaning the lower percentage, the difference between pre and post, the difference between a dry state and a wet state, the less percentage the better, because there's less mechanical changes to the line, right? And also take note that out of 4 of these lines, I soaked them in water. After all it was said and done, I soaked them again and weighed them again, and you can see the difference between after soaking it and then to the pre-dryer or whatever. There's hardly any difference at all, right? So meaning that pre-dryer, while it's sitting on the shelf, it's almost reached the moisture equilibrium already. So I don't think, soaking it is going to make that big of a difference at all. So to take note also, if you're looking at some of the properties, and these are some of the properties on nylons that are used for 3D printing, and you can see in some of them the tensile strength is higher in a dry status, while on the other sample it's higher in a wet status, just slightly. But also take notice, if you're comparing them both, the bending strength on both of these samples, it's higher in a dry status. And the bending strength, or the flexural strength, the bending strength is its ability to resist deformation under a load. So the higher the better, because at that point that's recorded, it's actually the flexural strength before it breaks, before it deforms, right? And in both of these cases, it's higher in the dry state. So there are probably additives in these nylons that we don't know about. And even on a side note, just the color, it can be identical filaments, but just different colors will make some changes on the behavior. So when you're dealing with a nylon filament line or trimmer line, UV is going to play a huge role. If you have stored your trimmer line out on a shelf in the sun, out exposed everywhere, for who knows how long, a year later, it's going to be in pretty bad shape. And I don't think soaking it in water is going to reverse any kind of UV damage, right? So one thing I think that will make a difference is how you're storing your lines. So with your filament line, it all comes in a sealed plastic bag like this, and you can see the desiccant in there, right? So it is already sealed. It'll be able to sit on a shelf for a little while without attracting a lot of moisture. And after you open it up, if this other bag is not usable, then we put them in plastic bags like this, with some desiccant in there, and it helps keep it dry. I can sit it on the shelf for a while. So now I plan on doing the same thing with all these nylon trimmer lines. I'm going to bag them up, have some desiccant in there, and throw it on a shelf. And I won't have to worry about it as much, right? Now if you're trying to 3D print with some of the trimmer lines, it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. Because, with all these nylons, there could be some additives in there that we just don't know about. And even say, I guess take note that even if the filaments are identical, just the color changes between that filament will make a difference when you're printing, right? I guess it's kind of like comparing PLA to PLA plus, or the PA6 to PA12. I mean, there's slight differences, and you have to take account of that when you're printing and your settings on your slicer. So there's a lot to consider when you're talking about using trimmer lines for printing, because they're even a different size. Like this blue stuff, it's 0.065, right, diameter. With filaments that we print with, it's 1.75 millimeters, which is 0.068 or 0.069. So it is a little smaller. Plus, when you look at the cross section of these things, they usually have some cutouts or ribs or something to make it look like it's going to cut better, your weeds better. So you're actually pushing in less material through your extruder. And so there's different settings you have to think about, like say your feed rate, you might have to bump it up to 105, 110% and keep on going until you get a nice feed through coming out of your hot end, right? And also when it's coming in, you have to make sure the smaller diameter, make sure that it's not slipping on your the feed gears on your extruder, right? So there's a lot of things you have to consider if you're going to try to use this nylon as to print with. It can be done, but you're going to have to do a lot of testing first. Alright, well, here's the results. So I just did the calibration cube, that X, Y, and Z calibration cube, if you can see this. I don't know if you can. But looking at it, of course it did print, but I can tell when it was done printing. You can see the string that was going on up here on the top. And when you look at this, it really looks under extruded. So I think I was right. You'd have to start out and go up to 105%, 110% of your feed, and see if it gets some better layering on it. So it can be done, but like I said, it's going to take a little work. So the bottom line, pardon the pun, if you have some trimmer line and it seems to last a lot longer than others, well, keep using it and store it out of the sun. Store it away somewhere in a bag out of the sun, right? And I don't think soaking it in water is going to make any difference. And on the other side, if you find some trimmer line that you've tested and can print with it, well, go for it, use it. But then again, with any other, just like any other filament, put it in a bag with some desiccant and keep it dry. Well, I hope this answers questions from both sides, both the 3D printer side and the yard and garden side, right? And I guess that's it for this video. So as always, be sure to like, subscribe, and watch for my next video.